Most preppers are told that survival is all about buying more gear, new batteries, new radios, new must-have upgrades. But hidden behind the marketing is a different truth. Some technologies work so well and last so long that nobody wants to sell them to you. They don't break, they don't expire on schedule, and they don't keep you coming back as a customer. In this video, we're looking at 5 powerful tools and systems that quietly deliver real independence, the kind that makes you less dependent on stores, subscriptions, and supply chains. These are the technologies the survival industry won't promote, but every serious prepper should know about. Number 1. The battery bank that outlives you. Most people first get into preparedness by building some sort of small off-grid power setup. A solar panel on the roof, a compact lithium solar generator, a couple of deep cycle batteries in the garage, maybe even rechargeable AAs for flashlights and radios. At first glance, it looks like responsible planning. You flip the switch, the screen lights up, everything charges, and you feel like you're ready for storms, outages, or long-term disruptions. The uncomfortable truth is that almost every mainstream energy product we use is quietly degrading long before you ever truly need it. Lithium batteries degrade every time you cycle them. Even high-end cells slowly lose capacity if they sit fully charged in a hot garage or a shed. Deep cycle lead-acid batteries sulfate when left partially charged. They require careful maintenance, regular top-offs, and constant monitoring. If you forget a detail or leave them unused too long, they lose performance in ways that can't be reversed. Rechargeable AA batteries follow the same pattern. They promise years of life. Yet after a few seasons of storage or sporadic use, many of them deliver far less runtime than advertised. This is not accidental. Consumer power systems are built on the idea of replacement. They give you just enough reliability to feel confident, but not enough durability to stay independent for a lifetime. That cycle purchase, degrade, replace, is part of the business model. It's the same pattern we see in phones, laptops, and appliances. Built-in obsolescence is profitable. Nickel-iron batteries break that pattern completely. They follow a different philosophy and a different lineage. Instead of trying to cram the highest possible energy density into the smallest possible case, they focus on long-life electrochemistry. The materials inside an Edison cell iron, nickel oxide, and an alkaline electrolyte are chosen not for sleekness or consumer appeal, but for resilience. The reaction inside doesn't produce the kind of internal damage that kills most modern batteries. When the battery charges and discharges, the cycling does not consume or break down the components the way lithium or lead-acid systems do. For a prepper, the difference is not theoretical. It's practical and long-term. A nickel-iron bank can take deep discharges without losing structural integrity. It can sit unused for long periods, even in harsh temperatures, and be restored just by replacing the electrolyte. That means a family relying on solar during a prolonged grid failure can use their system aggressively without worrying about killing their battery bank. It also means a forgotten system, an emergency cabin, an old shed, a backup power closet, can be revived after years of neglect. If you compare lifespans, the gap becomes almost absurd. A well-maintained lead-acid bank might last 5 to 7 years. Lithium might last 10 with careful cycling and ideal temperatures. Nickel iron routinely lasts several decades. Some early batteries built in the 1920s still work today. And not as antiques, some remain in limited industrial service. This extreme lifespan directly explains why nickel iron is not promoted in the mainstream prepping market. Companies profit by selling what eventually dies. You buy a sleek new power station, it works well, and a few years later, you need another. Channels push these products because commissions are tied to new models, not long-life gear that never needs replacing. From a practical standpoint, nickel-iron batteries require planning. They are larger and heavier, and their lower efficiency means you need slightly more solar input to charge them effectively. They also need ventilation, because they can release hydrogen during aggressive charging. But once installed, they deliver stability that no other consumer-friendly battery chemistry can match. For long-term homestead preparedness, for off-grid cabins, for shelters where reliability outranks aesthetics, nickel iron is a fundamentally different way of thinking about power. You're no longer building a system that quietly decays in the corner of your garage. You're building a system that can endure the kinds of extended outages and slow-burning crises that preppers actually plan for. When the grid collapses, the roads shut down, and replacement parts are no longer coming on freight trucks, long-lasting energy storage stops being a convenience and becomes a survival pillar. Most people who rely on consumer lithium boxes will find themselves with dead batteries when they need them most. The family with a nickel-iron bank, on the other hand, continues to charge, continues to power radios and refrigeration, continues to maintain food safety and communication long after others are scaling down their lifestyle. Preparedness isn't just about what works today, it's about what still works when the world stops delivering packages. Nickel-iron batteries shift you from a temporary backup mindset to a generational resilience mindset. You don't buy them because they're trendy. You buy them because you want to own power, not rent it in 5-year cycles. Number 2. The frozen smoke that replaces bulk. Every prepper who has dealt with cold weather knows the struggle of maintaining warmth when energy is scarce. Whether you're heating a small room, sleeping in a tent, or planning for a grid-down winter, warmth usually means relying on bulky insulation. Puffy jackets, huge sleeping bags, thick foam pads. Gear that works well at first but wears out, absorbs moisture, collapses under pressure, or becomes uncomfortable during movement. The outdoor gear industry thrives on this principle. Your winter jacket loses loft, so you buy a new one. Your synthetic sleeping bag gets thinner, so you upgrade. Your camping pad cracks, so you replace it. Year after year, you're sold the idea that comfort requires volume, and that survival requires constant renewal of gear. Aerogel destroys that logic. Known as frozen smoke because of its ghostly translucent appearance, Aerogel offers the highest insulation performance of any known lightweight material. It was created for environments where failure is unacceptable: space missions, cryogenic labs, deep-sea oil lines, not for consumer gear. It insulates not by trapping loose air like down or synthetic fibers, but by forming microscopic pores so small that air molecules barely move. Heat transfer slows dramatically. For preppers, this changes everything. Instead of relying on bulky layers, you can incorporate thin aerogel blankets or panels into clothing, shelter walls, sleeping systems, vehicle interiors, and emergency kits. A few millimeters of aerogel can outperform centimeters of traditional insulation, which means you can stay warm using far less fuel. In long-term collapse scenarios, where fuel becomes a shrinking resource, controlling heat loss is equally as important as generating heat. Aerogel blankets do not lose performance the way down, and synthetic insulation do. They don't collapse, don't become waterlogged, and don't require delicate packing. You can use them for years without noticeable degradation. For preppers who store gear long-term, this matters. Much of the insulation bought today becomes less effective by the time you actually need it. Aerogel remains stable. In practical terms, aerogel can be used to line the underside of a cold floor, wrap water containers to prevent freezing, reinforce sleeping pads, or create emergency winter panels that turn a single heated room into a far more energy-efficient refuge. Urban preppers can use aerogel to boost apartment insulation without major renovations. Lining blackout curtains with a thin layer can noticeably reduce heat loss through windows. Manufacturers rarely promote aerogel for consumer preparedness because it doesn't create annual replacement cycles. A jacket insulated with aerogel panels might last a decade or more, with minimal loss of performance. That eliminates recurring revenue. Instead, most aerogel is sold to industrial customers, construction companies, oil rigs, aerospace projects, where durability matters more than marketing. For preppers, this means you won't find aerogel in big box outdoor stores. You'll find it in industrial suppliers, where it's sold in flexible blanket rolls. With simple tool scissors, adhesive, sewing kits, you can adapt it into almost any survival system. In a grid-down winter, having high-performance insulation can mean burning half as much wood, using far less propane, or needing fewer calories to stay warm. It reduces stress on your body, preserves your food stores, and keeps your living space habitable for longer. Aerogel isn't a luxury, it's a silent force multiplier. Most prepping advice focuses on how to make heat. Aerogel focuses on how not to lose it. In a long emergency, those two strategies are equally important. Number 3. The radio network with no off switch. Communications are one of the most misunderstood corners of preparedness. Most people believe owning a handheld radio automatically gives them long-range capability. They imagine being able to coordinate with family miles away, call for help, or monitor surrounding activity no matter what happens. But once you strip away repeaters, which require power, maintenance, and infrastructure, you discover that most radios have extremely limited range. Even worse, most consumer and ham radios broadcast openly. Anyone with a receiver can hear you. In a crisis, broadcasting your location, intentions, and movement patterns becomes a major security risk. The prepping community rarely discusses this openly because radio reviews, antenna tests, and handheld top 10 lists attract views and sell gear. But none of that solves the single biggest problem. Radios rely on a system that collapses quickly. A LoRa mesh network solves the structural vulnerabilities of traditional radios. LoRa, long-range, low-power, is a communication method that sends small data packets, text messages, location coordinates, warnings, check-in updates over long distances using very little power. When you run firmware like Meshtastic on a LoRa device, you turn it into a self-repeating communication node. Instead of one device trying to reach another directly, each node automatically forwards messages. If you have 10 people each running nodes within a neighborhood or valley, the network becomes a web. Your message hops from device to device until it reaches your group. If a node fails, battery dead, device damaged, the network reroutes itself instantly. This is the opposite of how traditional radio works. There is no tower, no central authority, and no single point of failure. As long as nodes exist, the network survives. For preppers, this is game-changing. You can place solar-powered relay nodes on rooftops, high ridges, or south-facing posts. They run for months or years with minimal maintenance. Your group can communicate across large areas silently, without relying on the grid, telecom towers, or vulnerable repeaters. LoRa mesh devices also support encryption by default. Your messages are not broadcast in the open. They become private group communications critical during disasters, civil unrest, or collapse scenarios where you don't want others listening. From a preparedness point of view, this gives you a secure alternative to cell networks. From a business standpoint, it's a threat. Telecom companies profit from monthly bills, not from small open-source radios that work without subscriptions. That's why you never see LoRa mesh promoted on mainstream tech channels or in stores. The economic model doesn't support widespread adoption. Setting up a mesh network is simple even for beginners. You buy a supported LoRa device, flash the firmware, pair it to your phone, and start sending encrypted messages. Add a second device, and you've doubled your range. Add a dozen, and you've created a resilient neighborhood communication grid. In a real-world emergency wildfires, hurricanes, civil disruptions, cyber attacks, when cell towers fail or become overloaded, mesh keeps functioning. Families can coordinate evacuations, monitor conditions, share alerts, or track each other's locations without relying on outside infrastructure. Preppers in urban areas can maintain contact between apartment buildings. Rural preppers can extend communication from one valley to the next. A mesh network doesn't replace all radio tools. It complements them. But it gives you something radios fundamentally lack: a decentralized, repairable, silent network controlled entirely by you. For long-term emergency preparedness, it becomes one of the most important technologies you can own, not because it's flashy, but because it continues working when everything else fails. Number 4, the seeds and systems that kill the grocery habit. Walk through the preparedness aisle of a big retail store, and you'll notice something immediately. Almost everything on the shelves is built around the assumption that you will always come back to buy more. Freeze-dried meals, tubs of powdered calories, boxed survival buckets with bright labels promising 25 years of shelf life all follow the same business pattern. They aren't meant to free you from the grocery store. They're meant to act as a temporary buffer until you run out and buy another round. From a prepping perspective, this creates a dangerous mindset. The idea that long-term resilience can be purchased in sealed plastic. It pushes people toward hoarding instead of producing, reacting instead of building. True preparedness asks a different question. Not, how much food can I store? But how much food can I produce, renew, and keep cycling without outside supply? That's where heirloom seeds and regenerative food systems become one of the most underrated technologies in the prepper world. They don't blink, buzz, or connect to Wi-Fi, but they represent the oldest and most reliable form of human survival tech. A packet of heirloom seeds can theoretically produce hundreds of future packets if managed correctly. That means you step off the treadmill completely. You're no longer dependent on shelves, trucks, and sales cycles. Your meals don't come from a factory. They come from soil, sun, and knowledge. The modern agricultural system, especially the commercial seed industry, is built around hybrid seeds and proprietary genetics. Hybrid seeds can produce large yields, but their offspring are unstable, meaning you can't reliably save seeds for the next generation. That forces growers back to the supplier every season. For large farms chasing specific crop traits, this makes sense. For preppers, it's a trap. In a long emergency, stores may not restock, shipping may stop, and even if seeds are available, prices may spike or supply chains may break. Heirloom and open-pollinated seeds change the entire equation. Their genetics are stable from generation to generation. That means what you plant today can become the seed stock of your future. Over several seasons, those plants begin adapting to your exact microclimate, your soil minerals, your sunlight hours, your watering patterns, your pests. You're not just growing vegetables, you're breeding resilience. To make this system work, you don't need a homestead or acres of land. Beginners can start small. A raised bed, a few containers, or even grow bags on a balcony can teach you the fundamentals: spacing, soil health, watering cycles, and which crops thrive where you live. You quickly learn that some crops, leafy greens, herbs, radishes, grow fast and reliably, while others demand more care. You figure out how much food you truly get per square meter and how often you need to replant to maintain steady production. Once you understand the rhythm of your space, you begin adding real prepper value. Systems. A gravity-fed irrigation setup can keep plants alive even if you're low on electricity. A basic compost bin turns kitchen scraps, weeds, and cardboard into nutrient-rich soil, closing the loop so you don't rely on store-bought fertilizer. A cold frame or homemade greenhouse extends your growing season, letting you produce fresh food earlier in spring and later into autumn. These low-tech systems quietly transform your home from a consumption unit into a production unit. A prepper who can grow food, save seeds, enrich soil, and maintain a steady rotation of crops holds a level of independence that stored calories alone can never match. Stored food is finite. A living garden is infinite, if you maintain it. The blacklist aspect reveals itself when you notice how little this kind of long-term self-sufficiency is promoted in mainstream prepping media. There's no major profit in selling you heirloom seeds once and then watching you grow your own food for years. There's much more profit in selling buckets of freeze-dried meals every time a headline goes viral. But a pantry full of sealed meals isn't a strategy, it's a buffer. When the buckets run out, they're gone. A working garden backed by regenerative systems becomes an engine that supports you indefinitely. It teaches you seasonal awareness, resource management, and realistic expectations about food production. It trains your hands and mind long before an emergency forces you to rely on those skills. And when systems around you fail, transport, fuel, supply chains, you're not watching shelves empty. You're watching seedlings sprout. Even simple tools become powerful in this system. A hand trowel, a broad fork, a seed sifter, a rain barrel. These are humble technologies, but they become survival infrastructure in a collapse scenario. When water pressure dies, rain catchment still works. When fertilizers disappear, compost continues. When grocery stores close, your soil doesn't. Preparedness isn't about trying to store your way out of every problem. It's about building loops that sustain themselves. When you start generating food instead of hoarding it, you break the grocery habit permanently. You become someone the system can't price out, supply limit, or starve. And that level of independence is exactly why these technologies rarely appear in prepping advertisements. They don't create repeat customers. They create self-reliant people. Number 5. The tools that refuse to be replaced. Walk into any modern home and look closely at the objects that fill the kitchen drawers, the workshop cabinets, and even the digital devices on the desk. You'll notice a pattern. Most tools today are designed to break, expire, or become obsolete. Non-stick pans peel and burn, sending you to the store for another. Power tools rely on proprietary batteries with short lifespans. Cheap multi-tools bend under real pressure. Software locks you into monthly payments. Even basic gadgets like thermometers and timers increasingly rely on electronics that fail long before their mechanical ancestors would have. This is the renting illusion of the modern world. You think you own things, but you actually own temporary conveniences. They work until they don't, and then you pay again. In everyday life, this is annoying. In a long-term emergency, it becomes a weak point that can break your entire preparedness plan. Experienced preppers build a completely different toolkit. They invest not in flashy gear, but in things designed before the era of disposable manufacturing. Cast iron cookware that lasts generations. Hand-cranked drills, braces, and saws that operate purely on muscle and physics. Canning equipment with no electrical dependencies. Analog gauges that don't need screens or firmware. These tools don't rely on a stable supply chain or a functioning repair network. The beauty of this approach is that it stacks resilience. Cast iron doesn't care if your stove works. You can use it over a fire, on coals, or in an oven. A handsaw doesn't care about dead batteries. A pressure canner doesn't need Wi-Fi to preserve food safely. A whetstone keeps blades sharp long after electric sharpeners fail. Even in the digital world, preppers who favor long-term reliability download offline maps, maintain digital libraries, and keep simple devices powered by AA batteries instead of proprietary packs that disappear from the market. This category of tools is blacklisted for the same economic reason as nickel-iron batteries and Aerogel. You buy them once, and you're set for decades. There's no subscription, no replacement cycle, no opportunity to sell you a new tactical version every year. Companies don't push cast iron pans because they last longer than most modern cookware brands combined. They don't push hand tools because electrical tools tied to unique batteries generate more sales. They don't push lifetime gear because lifetime customers are not profitable. For beginner preppers, transitioning to this mindset is transformative. Instead of asking, "What's the latest survival gadget?" you ask, "Which simple tools will keep working when everything else fails?" That question leads you toward durability, mechanical simplicity, and maintainability. A small list of examples makes the point clear. A cast iron skillet replaces years of non-stick pans. A hand drill replaces a dependency on proprietary battery packs. A quality axe replaces a dozen poorly made tools. A pressure canner extends food independence indefinitely. A wind-up timer or analog thermometer replaces fragile electronics. A library of offline reference books replaces cloud-dependent knowledge. These tools also shift your skill set. Modern convenience tools aim to remove skill from the equation. One-button cooking, automated saws, software that handles everything. Real preparedness demands the opposite. The more you can do with simple, non-electric tools, the less fragile your system is. If your gear relies on constant charging or precise digital interfaces, you're building vulnerability into your survival plan. When you combine these durable tools with the other technologies on the Prepper Blacklist long life power, high-efficiency insulation, decentralized communication, and regenerative food systems, you begin to understand what true preparedness looks like. It's not about stockpiling infinite supplies. It's about creating a lifestyle insulated from dependency. A household equipped with lifetime tools doesn't panic when stores close or when replacement parts stop shipping. A garden fed by compost doesn't need chemical fertilizers. A mesh network doesn't shut down when cell towers fail. A nickel-iron battery bank doesn't die when consumer batteries do. Layer by layer, you eliminate the need to participate in endless replacement cycles. By the time you integrate all these elements, you've stepped out of the consumer script completely. You're no longer someone being sold fear and gear. You're someone who knows how to produce, repair, maintain, grow, and adapt. And that kind of independence is exactly what the modern economy isn't built to support. Because once you have it, you stop being a customer.